Welcome to Stories of Amazing Grace. The views and opinions expressed on Stories of Amazing Grace are those of the guests appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of the Madison Church of Christ or the producer of this program. Enjoy.
Well, good evening. Good evening. I'm Larry Souter, and welcome to Stories of Amazing Grace. We're coming to you from Investigator Chapel at the Madison Church of Christ in Madison, Tennessee. Thank you for joining us on YouTube and for being a part of our live audience and those listening by way of radio. Glad that you're a part of it as well. Our theme scripture comes from Romans 8:38 through 39. I'm sure that nothing can separate us from God's love, not life or death, not angels or spirits, not the present or the future, not powers above, powers below, nothing. And all creation can separate us from God's love for us in Christ Jesus our Lord. Well, our guest tonight is a private eye. You know any private eyes? I did. Was Rockford Files, was that a private eye? I'm not sure. Who was a private eye? Was he a private eye? And you're a private eye. Well, Norma Tillman is a native Nashvilleian and a 30-year veteran private investigator who specializes in locating and reuniting missing family members and finding missing heirs. So I'm kind of looking forward to maybe a little money coming my way. Her father was a homicide detective with the Nashville Police Department, and Norma worked with the police department for 11 years before becoming a private investigator. One of her favorite quotes is, "No one cares how much you know until they know how much you care." In addition to being a PI, she also is a real estate agent. At 80 years old, she still has not decided, did I read that right? 80 years old, she still has not decided what she wants to do when she grows up. So maybe we can help her tonight. She has written several books, including Private Investigation 101, How to Find Almost Anyone, Anywhere, The Adoption Searcher's Handbook, and The Man with the Turquoise Eyes. And those books are free tonight out there on the table. Some of you have quick feet, can get out there and get one. She preferred that you not take one of each, but maybe take one of the different selections out there, but they are free tonight. Norma has also appeared on many national television programs, reuniting families. Before we interview her, there's a video clip I want you to see, and the program is called Case Closed, and the segment is called The Debt of Honor. Let's play it.
Vietnam is far removed from the quiet tranquility of Saranac Lake, a village in upstate New York. But for one veteran, the war is just a memory away.
At times it's like being locked in a nightmare that nobody else will ever understand. War is not something that ever goes away.
1966, Vietnam. To the men of Charlie Company, 3rd Platoon, 28th Infantry, Lieutenant McCoy was more than a leader. He was a friend.
He was right there with his men, and it was the kind of example that early on in that war we needed. We needed men who would lead. And he did.
On February 28th, Lieutenant George McCoy entered a minefield to recover the bodies of 3 enemy soldiers killed during a Viet Cong attack. Larry had originally volunteered for the mission.
I had begged and pleaded and volunteered and got just everything short of insubordinate to have been the one to go out there in the first place. And he would not see it, would not hear it, would not allow it.
Then, as Larry watched horrified, the lieutenant stepped on a mine.
I actually felt the concussion of the explosion that killed him. That's how close that was.
Larry ran through the minefield to the stricken officer.
I was there to cradle him, and that's when he asked me to deliver a message to his family. And I promised him I would. And he died. There would never be another George McCoy.
Larry had made a promise he had to keep.
My name is Larry Robertson. My story is reference a debt of honor I owe to a fallen comrade in Vietnam, and I would appreciate any assistance you can provide.
After his call, case-closed investigator Norma Tillman traveled to Saranac Lake to meet with her new client.
Did you know anything about where he was from?
No, I knew he was from the Midwest somewhere, but even the military records wouldn't give me that.
I felt like we were a team from the very beginning. I gave Larry the same promise he gave George, and I didn't intend to let Larry down. I didn't know how, and I didn't know where, and I didn't know when, but I knew it was going to be possible.
Finally, 30 years after a promise made in a field in Vietnam, Larry Robertson paid his debt of honor.
I want you to meet Larry Robertson. Larry, this is Mrs. McCoy.
Ma'am,
How do you do?
I'm honored.
Thank you, Mother.
Larry, I understood that you wanted to tell me something.
Yes, ma'am. I served with your son very honorably and very proudly for his time in Vietnam. And I was with him at the instant of his death. And he asked me to tell you that he loved you very much and to please make sure his family knew. And for 30 years, almost, I've kept looking. And I am just so proud and so pleased and so honored to be able to tell you that you all were the last thought on his mind when he left this world. And he brought nothing but credit on this family. He was the most valuable person I ever knew.
For Henrietta McCoy and her family, it was the first time they had the opportunity to speak with someone who actually knew George in Vietnam. For Norma, it was a job well done.
What was it like today? It was a wonderful feeling. I even feel like I'm part of this family. You know, it's like I have done something that makes me feel wonderful. I've made two people very, very happy.
Larry had one more stop to make before he could say, case closed.
Sir, Sergeant Robertson reporting. Mission's accomplished. I made a promise, and as Robert Service put it, that a promise made is a debt unpaid, and the trail has its own stern code. And I have a feeling that I will probably be able to take a nice, long, deep breath and just relax for maybe the first time since that day in February of 1966.
And please welcome Norma Tillman. Have a seat. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Well, you have a lot of stories to tell, a lot of books out there, but I want to begin with one question. Is it a mission, is it a job, or is it both?
Both.
Why?
When I first started finding missing people and reuniting families, it was an awesome responsibility. I knew I could ruin someone's life easily. But when I saw the results of when they were reunited and how it gave closure, it changed their lives. And therefore it became very fulfilling, and it became my mission. It's like God has allowed me to do this, and all the people that I help, I believe God intervenes and allows them to be reunited, or to get their answers, at least, to have closure.
And you feel like it's a gift to be able to find missing people?
Yes.
A gift from God?
Yes.
Okay. Well, you've reached out to the congregation here, and at least two people you have searched for some missing people in their life. So I want to go down to the audience and talk to them, and you can tell us what kind of results you've had. So
Okay.
let me do that. And our first person is David Anderson. Stand up here. I want to get you on this camera right here. So you have been searching or missing who in your life?
Wanda Warren.
Who was Wanda?
Wanda was a friend that I met in Cookeville, Tennessee, when I was a sophomore at Tennessee Tech. And so we started dating, and
one thing led to another, or what?
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, it was a close relationship, and we even talked about marriage, but I was still in college, And my older brother talked to me, and so he said it's not a good thing to do right now, just put it off. And so Wanda, my friend, she was a little upset about that, and she just up and joined the Air Force. So that's when I lost contact with her.
And Norma, you searched for her. How did you do that?
Well, of course, I use a lot of different databases. I use Ancestry.com, and I have professional databases. But what I learned was, unfortunately, that his friend Wanda was deceased now. But I don't like to stop at just finding somebody deceased. I want to know who's left and what they can tell me. So I was able to find her daughters, and her daughters were thrilled that David remembered their mom and said, oh, she never forgot David, and he was the love of her life, and how her life might have been different had they have married back when they were in high school and college.
You never know. Well, we have her picture. Take a look here.
Oh, my.
Is that what she looked like?
Yes. Beautiful.
And there's another picture.
Wow.
And we have a copy of those for you. I want to give those to you
Thank you.
so you can remember her by.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. And Kathy Tracy. Stand up. Come on down. You don't know your father, your biological father, but you've been looking, searching for him?
Well, I actually did not know that, I don't know how to say, I had a person that I thought was my father for years. I did not know him either. But then when I was maybe 35, 40, I found out that he was not my biological father. I had no name and my mother died.
No name at all?
No.
Wow.
And my mother died when I was almost 13, and she never told me.
So you have no pictures or just no knowledge of your father?
No, nothing.
And what did you find out, Norma?
I found out that many people live with the unknown, and their search is for closure. She needs some answers, and she needs to know her father's side of the family. Mainly, she probably needs medical information. Just kind of the unknown will bother people, and regardless of what we find, the closure will set them free. And so I was able to go on Ancestry. Fortunately, Kathy recently did an Ancestry DNA test. That came back with a whole list of cousins, which meant nothing to her. But to me, it's like, oh, yes, let's contact these cousins and see if some of them might be related on your father's side, and that's how we're going to find your father.
So there's still hope.
There's still hope. So far, 5 of those cousins have responded, and she's gotten the messages today.
All right, great. Thank you very much. Well, we appreciate you doing that search and continuing the search. And is there Reggie Morris in our audience tonight? There's a cough, but I'm not sure if it's Reggie Morris.
I don't think that was Reggie. Well, Reggie
what
was
is the
going to
story
try
about
to.
Reggie?
Yeah, Reggie was going to try to be here. He was adopted, and I was able to find his biological mother, and later found his biological father. And they have a great relationship. It was a very happy ending. But he was probably in his 40s when he began searching, and he really wanted closure. He wanted to know his identity. He wanted medical history. He wanted to know his heritage, and he got all his answers.
Okay.
It just makes their life more complete once they get the answers. They're not necessarily searching for a relationship. They're searching for their own identity. Can I say something else?
Say it.
Way back in the 70s, the American Academy of Pediatrics had a study committee that they concluded that in order to develop normally, one needs to know their identity. Therefore, to deny them the right to know their identity is victimizing someone who's adopted or someone who doesn't know their information. I've long been an advocate of let's open those records and let these adoptees have their information. As you know, well, first of all, let me tell you about the first adoptee. And his records are open. And he was allowed to know his biological mother.
Do you know who she's
His whole
talking
family.
about?
Who can tell me who was the first adoptee?
Is this a Bible-based crowd here or not?
How about Moses in Exodus chapter 2? Moses' mother didn't give him up because she didn't love him, she didn't want him, she had to. It was an act of love, and in order to save his life, she saw no other way other than to allow him to be adopted. Fortunately, though, the Pharaoh's daughter sent for her to take care of him, so he was allowed to know his mother, and I believe this is all in the Bible for us as an example. Maybe the records should be open, and maybe adoptees should be allowed to have this information. Unfortunately, only 6 states allow this. Tennessee's one of them, one state that has open records. We have some of the best laws in the whole country.
You had some input in
I
changing?
became a lobbyist way back in the 80s and 90s, and I had a little bit of input. I didn't have the final, but I did get the law changed for a while, and then another group came along after me and got the records open.
Well, tell us about how you became a private investigator. As a child, did you walk around with a magnifying glass? Or,
No,
what?
No, but I did enjoy mystery books, and I wanted to figure out who done it, and and my dad was a detective, and when I was 10, I read homicide books on
Right.
murders, and I don't know, I was normally curious. Some people call it nosy. Those who know me know I just have to find the truth. So that was me as a child growing up, is I was always curious and I was always inquisitive, and I read a lot of mystery books. But as I got older, it never occurred to me that I'd end up being a detective or an investigator. As time went on, though, when my children went to school, I wanted something to do while they were at school. And I volunteered at the police department. And who would have thought, I just wanted something to do. I was a bored housewife, you might say, wanting to fill the day till the kids got out of school. And so I began dispatching at the police department and started out in Mount Juliet. Then I went down to Metro, stayed at Metro. After 4 years, I said, I sure would like to go to the police academy, and the chief let me. And so in 1978, I went through the police academy and was trained to be a police officer. And they created a job for me in the sex abuse division. So I stayed there for 6 more years. Those of you who know Ricky Roll, I worked with Ricky in the sex abuse division. He was one of the detectives, and he works your security here, I believe. So anyway, after 11 years of working in law enforcement, I kind of had enough. But the thing I enjoyed most was tracking down a criminal. I loved to track down somebody nobody else could find. One time I worked on the 10 Most Wanted, and it's like, this is the ultimate search. I'll never find anything any more exciting than this. And then after I became a private eye and started looking for missing people and reuniting families, it was more than that search for the 10 Most Wanted. It just was so fulfilling and so challenging and so rewarding.
I enjoy searching on the internet, camera reviews, just information. So would I make a good private eye or not?
Yes, if you like to look for information, and there's so many trails to follow on the internet.
Is it dangerous?
Is it dangerous?
Don't need a gun.
It can be. Like once in a while, I've worked a few cases that were dangerous. Yeah.
What was the most dangerous case?
Well, I was hired to follow this man, and it turned out he was a kingpin in organized crime. And I had a tracking device. This was when they were legal. Eventually, they were not legal, but back when the tracking devices were legal, I followed this guy everywhere. And if he had found out that I knew what he was doing and what he was, that I was, I was there all the time. But
I think it was in your book, in one of your chapters. So you actually put the device under the car, stuck it underneath there.
Yeah, it's a magnet. It's about the size of a pack of cigarettes, and you put it on the frame of the car. And the batteries were getting low, and I have a receiver that I had in my car that would go beep, beep, beep. And the closer I was to him, it went beep, beep, beep. It gets higher pitch and faster, and So you know you're right there at him. But the batteries were getting low, and I had to change them, and I waited till one day he was out on the golf course. And I just stepped out of my car and dropped my purse and reached down to pick up my lipstick, got the device, changed the battery, picked up my lipstick, got back in the car, and that's how I did it. Nobody ever notices me.
One of your books out in the lobby is How to Find Almost Anyone Anywhere. Can you give me some tips of how to find almost anyone anywhere?
Well, it's very hard to live in the United States without leaving a trail. From the time you're born until after you die, your trail is approximately 7 miles long.
Really?
Yes. Most of those are going to be public records that are available in a database now. Everybody puts information in a database. The only information that's really private that you have to have certain permissions to access are like your medical records. I can't access your medical records unless you file a medical claim. And then in order to get your claim, you have to sign a release form for me to go get those medical records.
But you could have,
I have to have permission from you.
You could get my social security number.
Oh, yeah, that's a no-brainer.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you
What am I going to do with it once I get it?
Do you register somewhere to do that? Not everybody can do that.
No, we have professional databases for investigators only, and we have to pay a fee, and we have to be licensed and show that we're licensed to have access to it. But I can run your name, Larry, and I can probably get 25 to 50 pages of information about you. I can get your date of birth, the places you've lived the last 10 years, and who your neighbors were, who you associate with, who your relatives are, how you vote, if you have a hunting or fishing permit, and on and on and on. Any record and every record goes into that database.
Some of it, though, is not accurate, because I did type my name in.
You're not on the real professional one.
True. I typed in Larry Souter, net worth. And I had been hired to be in a movie, but I didn't go ahead and be in the movie. I did something else. My name is in the credits for a movie. King Kong Lives is the movie.
Okay.
It failed. The movie failed, but I'm in the credits of the movie. And they list my net worth as $1.5 million, which is not bad, but I don't have $1.5 million. But
I wonder where that information came from.
I don't know.
Wonder
but
I don't know what database.
I kind of like to jack up the net worth to make it look better.
Yeah, that would be nice if you could collect it.
So,
unfortunately, there are lots of databases that'll charge you $10 for information, and it's not accurate, it's not current, but the professional databases are different, and that's what sets us apart, is we can have access to more accurate and more up-to-date information.
you've got the real deal.
I've got the real deal, yes.
The most requested search?
The most requested is to find a father, just like Kathy out here. 50% of all children, well, first of all, 50% of all marriages now today are ending in divorce. 50% of the children of divorced parents are being raised by a single parent. And 50% of those kids don't know the absent parent, primarily their father. And those kids have a really high risk of so many things going wrong in their life. I have brochures out there on the table with the books that will tell you what happens when children are raised where the mother has to go to work, there's no father, and they're left alone.
And let me show you some of those. We just happen to have some of those.
You just happen to have that.
Children from fatherless homes. Suicide, 63%. Behavior problems, 85%. Homeless and runaways, 90%. High school dropouts, 71%. Commit rape due to displaced anger, 80%. In juvenile institutions, 70%. And prison, 80%. And there's more to that list. Alcohol and drug problems. Boys are more likely to have confused identities, it says. Girls more likely to become pregnant, and more. So not having a father in the home is a big problem.
It is. It's
Yeah.
one of society's probably most, it's probably the one problem affecting society, because if this problem was solved and there were no children being raised like this, crime would go down. Society would have a whole different crime statistic. But anyway, right now, I don't see that there's a solution. too many unwed mothers, too many unplanned pregnancies, and too many kids with nobody to love them and raise them.
Let's go to something a little happier. You were on several TV shows. I put together 3 quick reunions from some old TV shows. Let's roll that, some happy endings from your searches.
We've been working at it for a month and a half, and Norma has been on it even longer, and today is your day.
Today is your day, Debbie. We have a best friend from your childhood. Welcome today, Barbara Deaton from Norfolk, Virginia.
Barbara Deaton from Norfolk, Virginia. Come on out. Just where is she?
And you found all these.
Oh, yes.
That must give you a lot of pleasure.
Oh, unbelievable. It's like, that's why I still do it. It makes me happy. It makes everybody happy. And it's just a thrill. And again, I love the challenge just to see if I can find somebody. But I love the reward better of them being happy and getting closure. And I don't know, it's just a little mission that I've been doing for 30 years. That first reunion there where the mother was grabbing her daughter, that daughter had been abducted by her father when she was 6 years old. He told her mother didn't want her anymore and didn't love her anymore, and she was going to come live with him. That mother had searched for the 14 years. She was 21 when I found her. And when I contacted her, she said, "Who's looking for me?" And I said, "Your mother." And she said, "You've just changed my life forever. I never thought my mother would ever want me again." And so it made a difference in both of their lives. It had a very sad ending, though. A couple of years later, Debbie, the daughter, this is how I feel like God worked in their lives. Debbie found out her mother loves her. Debbie got married, had a baby, and died a day after childbirth. But she had been reunited and had one happy year with her mother. I had another case like that where the father took the child when she was 6 and told the mother, "I'm taking her to Disney World, we'll be back tonight." Mother never saw her again, and 40 years went by. This was on Oprah. I reunited this mother and daughter. After 40 years, the daughter had been told her mother died. And the father had lied to her all those years, and she'd been in counseling. And when I contacted her, she thought I was playing a joke on her. She said, "My mother died when I was 6 years old, and I've been grieving ever since." And I said, "No, your mother's been looking for you for 40 years. And they agreed to be reunited on Oprah.
There's a chapter in your book that talks about 6 degrees, I believe, 6 degrees of separation. Tell me about that. What does that mean?
6 degrees of separation means there's only like 6 people between you and the person we're looking for. But we don't know who those 6 people are. So this is a story that a birth father who was at Vanderbilt College had dated this girl in high school. Their families were friends, and she was pregnant and didn't tell him, and she gave up the child for adoption. When he found out, he was totally devastated. He wanted to marry her. He wanted their child, and he didn't have any rights. But he searched. He hired me to search for this son that he never knew, who he worried about for 21 years. He waited till his 21st birthday, and I found his son for him. They were reunited and had been sitting 4 box seats apart all those years at the Shelbyville Horse Show. That's what 6 degrees of separation is.
But before that, he was working in an electronics store, the boy
It was actually a music store.
Music store. And you went in kind of not necessarily undercover, but you didn't come out and say, I'm a private eye.
Yeah, I did tell
you
him.
did?
I said, I'm a private eye, and he was right across the street from the courthouse, and I said, I'm over here working on looking for somebody that was adopted, and he just opened up and said, are you looking for me? And I said, are you adopted? And he said, yes. So that's how I found out. I didn't want to disrupt his life, didn't want to tell him if he didn't already know, but he told me. And he said, my girlfriend's also adopted, and I know she's going to want to meet you. And she's looking for her birth parents. And I said, what about you? And he said, oh, no, I don't want to meet them. And he had his reasons for not wanting to meet them. I planted a little seed. He thought they were going to be somebody he was ashamed of. He was convinced his father was in the Navy, and his father was never in the Navy. But he said, I just know he's laying under a bridge, a drug addict or an alcoholic, and he's not the kind of person I want to meet. So that was his impression in his mind of what his father was going to be like. And all I said was, but what if you were not ashamed of him? What if you were proud of him? Would that make a difference? And I left, and I said, I'll see you next week. I have to come back next week. And when I came back, he said, can we talk? And I said, yes. And he said, I thought about what you said, and I want to meet my father. Can you arrange it?
But they were together all the time, in a sense.
They were just 4 box seats away at the Shelbyville Horse Show all those years, for 21 years.
Amazing. There's a super sad story, I think, in your book. I'm going to butcher it here and tell what I know, then you can correct me and elaborate.
Okay.
But as I recall from the chapter, there's a woman, she has 2 daughters. One of the daughters is being sexually abused by her father. She decides to put 2 of the kids and herself in a car, go out on a country road somewhere, open up the trunk, take out a hose and some duct tape, tie it to the tailpipe, put it through the window, and just end everybody's life. And that begins to happen, evidently. And someone comes along fairly accidentally, finds the people unconscious in the car, gets them out, takes them to the hospital. She's in the emergency room, the woman looking up with bright light shining in her face, and the doctor's looking over, and she says, everything's fine, you're going to be okay. We've called your husband, and your husband's going to take the kids away. I thought, oh, what a sad situation, but it gets worse. So tell me the right story here.
The husband
Try to make it better if you can.
well, the mother had to eventually go back to court to regain custody after she attempted suicide.
But she did this because she thought the other child was going to be sexually abused.
Oh, yeah. She was so afraid that the kids were both going to be abused by their father, and they were very young. I think I had a picture of them. I don't know if...
yes. I wish we had that on the screen.
Yeah,
maybe you can
but they were young girls under 10 years old. Yeah. The father disappeared in an RV, and he was staying at campgrounds and state parks, and so there was no trail. Yeah. He had retired from a really Fortune 500 company, and he got a check every month, but his sister would go to the post office, get his check, somehow deposit it in the bank, so he was able to get money, but there was no trail to follow. And this RV was going all over the country, and the chances of finding him, the FBI was looking for him. And another private eye was hired by the mother, who contacted the private eye that was hired by the mother, said, this is not something I can do, but let me call Norma. So he called me, and I said, let me see what I can do. I don't have anything to work with, but I don't know how I was able to find out that the father had purchased a pager in Ocala, Florida. And I went down to the store where he bought the pager, and they remembered him and had some information or whatever. Somehow I was led to this rural community that was like a cult. It was like Jim Jones' cult. It's the way it looked like. When I went in there, it was really weird. It was really scary. And that's where I thought they were, but there's nobody there. And so I would go back out. Nobody ever said a word to me. I went in the house, went in all around, and there's nobody there. There were people working out in the field, and there was one man like overseeing the people working. And he looked at me like, coming in and out, gave me a really hard look, but never said a word. So when I got back out on this dirt road, the mail carrier was leaving mail, and I pulled the mail carrier over, or I stopped and they stopped. And I showed them the picture of the girls and the father. And I said, have you seen these people? And he said, I just left the mail back there and I saw them. Yeah, they're there. So then there was a little grocery store. This is in a rural area, a little grocery store, and I took the pictures in. Did these people ever come in here? Yes, they do. So I had 2 people say, yes, they're over here. There were some electricians working in this grocery store. They were up on a ladder, and they said, we have a call to go over there next to do some work. I said, will you go in and tell me if you see these people? Will you come back out and tell me? And they did. And all I knew to do was call the FBI. Or I called the private eye who asked me to do this for him, who contacted the FBI. The FBI called me and said, lady, we don't know how you did it, but you can go home. We'll take over now. I don't usually work on any cases that law enforcement's working on because I know it'll interfere with what they're doing. And I don't know why I ended up doing this, but I did. And I followed the trail, and it led me to them, and then the FBI took over.
Is there a cutoff age where you won't search for someone?
I don't usually search for anyone under 21, but I thought this was an exception. I was afraid their lives could be in danger or they could be harmed, and I just made an exception. I can't remember any other case that I did that involved young children.
Is this the most rewarding case, or what was the most rewarding case?
Well, the one girl, that was very rewarding. The one that I found had been missing for 40 years and reunited her with her mother.
Right.
That was one that I'll never forget. And then,
Do you follow up on those? Do you know if there's...
No, once I reunite them, that's usually the end of it, unless they contact me. Yeah, I just move on to the next search. And working in law enforcement, you kind of have to build a wall where you don't let it get to you. It's like you can cut it off and not let it consume your life. And so I have that way of, once I finish a case, I let go and I move on to the next person and help them.
So you're able to do that, compartmentalized, or you
Exactly,
couldn't move on, I guess.
I don't let it, some of them really touch me. There's been a few I haven't been able to find that are really good stories, but we don't have enough time to hear all the stories.
But there's some you cannot find.
There were a couple I couldn't find. One was a young man abandoned in New York in 1933. That was during the Depression, I think, or I don't know if it was over by 1933, but children were left everywhere, and he was left on a church pew, and he never had any identity and never had a family. The priest, it was a Catholic church, the priest found him, took him to the New York Foundling Hospital. There they assigned that as his birthday, the day he was found. And then he was placed in foster family after foster family after foster family. At 16 years old, he ran away and joined a carnival. And he said to me, every day of my life, I go to the mailbox to see if my mother has written me. He thought she would come looking for him. But there was no information to work with. I tried everything I could think of, and I thought publicity on one of these talk shows would be the way to get somebody out there to respond and say, yeah, Aunt so-and-so went to New York and had a child, and we never knew what happened. But they never would let me do it on TV because it didn't have a happy ending.
Well, we're all about happy endings here,
I know. We like happy endings. And then another one was a girl down in Mexico that the Mexican authorities were horrible to deal with, and they wouldn't help me at all.
But you normally don't work out of the country.
No, this was a missing heir, and I just couldn't resist going down there to look for her.
Are there some fathers or mothers that you have found where the son or daughter has been extremely disappointed or...
One particularly I remember had a new baby, and we had found her mother, and she wanted me to kind of do a background and tell her all about her mother. And her mother was on her third marriage, living on a shrimp boat down in Louisiana, I believe, and the daughter decided she's not the kind of woman I want to be around my baby, and she was happy to have her information, but she never wanted her mother to come to her house, or she never wanted to meet her. She was not what she hoped for. And that's okay. Most of the cases I work on, we always talk up front. It may not be what you hope for, We never know what we're going to find, but it's better than the unknown. So they can live with what they know, but what they don't know really bothers them.
And closure is real important.
Closure is very important, yeah.
Well, we might have some questions from the audience. Anthony, you ready? Microphone is, where is the microphone? Oh, wait, let's use this one.
Is that?
This one, yeah, use this one.
All right, just want to make sure.
Hi, Norma. Thank you for coming. This is really a subject that touches our heart. If you have an adopted child who doesn't want to find his or her parent, and the adoptive parents want to, what do you recommend about that?
Well, I don't think the children under 21 will have access to information to lead them to their biological parents. But are you saying you have an adopted child that's
Yes.
under 21?
No, he's older.
He's over 21.
He's
And usually male
29.
adoptees, for some reason, are reluctant to search because they feel they're going to be rejected. They didn't want me when I was born, they're not going to want me now. Kind of like the boy I found who thought his father was in the Navy. It's a thing where they fear rejection. So, but girl adoptees are different. They want to know. They don't care what they find out. They just go find them. But in your child's case, if he doesn't want to search, that's okay. He probably will one day want to know his medical history or some other information. Is he married or with a family?
He's divorced. Would you would you do it for the adoptive parents' information?
Not if someone doesn't want to be contacted. I mean, I wouldn't put the adoptive parents in touch with him or give them any information.
No. Just find out about the person, the birth mother, without her knowing.
Oh, yeah, that's kind of what I did for this other girl. The mother never knew I was checking on her, but yeah, they just want to know the information.
And then have that information if the child ever wanted that information.
I think it's healthy. I really do. I think that when they live with the unknown, they suppress. It's like a hole in their heart, a void in their life. And it causes their life to be out of balance. I guarantee anybody whose life's out of balance, who has this missing person or a void in their life, there's 7 areas that are going to be, in order to develop normally and to have a good life, these all have to be lined up. But when you have something missing out of your life, the scales are not balanced. There's something missing and it causes your life to be out of balance. And it's mentally, physically, spiritually, career, financial, relationship. I forgot what the other one is. But all of those areas of your life, like you said, he's divorced, and it might be because this was eating at him or suppressed in his life, and you don't really know that maybe that was bothering him.
Well, we wouldn't want to bring it up if he were not wanting to do it, but we would like to know about this person who's given us this gift.
I think that would be an awesome gift for him if you were to do that. You know, the state of Tennessee will allow you to have that information if you don't already have it.
Well, the adoption transpired in Texas.
Oh, okay. Well, that might be one of the states that will not give you the information.
It was a
You
closed
don't have a
adoption.
name to look for?
No. We have gifts, but not really much identifying information, but it was in Texas.
It was a closed adoption, so
Closed.
there was an agency or a
Yes.
lawyer or somebody was involved that would have records. So
Yes.
that might be a way of you bypassing the state records.
Mhm. Well, I know other people have questions, but thank you.
You're
for
so welcome.
all the
I
information.
hope something I said helps you.
Thank you. It did.
Thank you.
While we're waiting on the next one, the boy in the newspaper, could we show that picture on the screen? Tell me about this story. Did we already cover that?
Well, back when I worked as a dispatcher at the Mount Juliet Police Department, this little boy was found wandering on Highway 70 with nothing but a diaper. And it was in January, and it was about 20 degrees, and no one knew who he was or where he came from. And somebody called it in, the police car brought him in, handed him to me. Somehow they went and found some clothes to put on him, and that's me holding him, and he hadn't said a word to anybody. And there was a typewriter, and I started playing with the typewriter, and I said, if I knew your name, I could type your name. And he said, Michael Sean. He told me his name. And the Channel 5 and everybody was all around, you know. It's like, who is this kid and what's the story? Turned out his mother had left him with his aunt who had to go to work. Her truck driver husband came home and went to bed. Didn't know the boy was there. The boy climbed out of bed and got out of the house and was wandering around. Wow. So it was just an unfortunate situation. But he was found and identified.
Good. Yes.
How hard is it to find a person back in 2-3 generations with adoption? You know, we've gone so far, and then this person was adopted, and we don't know any more than that.
What state was it in?
I don't even think we know that.
Okay,
so I don't know.
You don't have any information to work with?
I've got her name, but, you know, and she had a sister.
Is this the adopted name or the...
we don't know.
You don't
know? It's that far. It's a great, you know, it's that far back.
Have you looked on Ancestry?
Done a little bit, but not
Ancestry
not very far.
has a wealth of information.
Okay.
It's like a gold mine for me. I use it when I'm looking for missing heirs. I have to sometimes go back to the census of 1910. But in your case, you're going back 3 generations. There could be a census record. If I were you, I'd just try putting her name in on Ancestry.com and see what happens. Okay. You might get some information.
So we need a name.
Name
is
very important.
If you have a social security number, you got pay dirt there,
That's
right?
a slam dunk, yeah.
If you got an address.
An address,
phone
even
number.
though...
We don't need you then, right?
That's true. If you have an old address of where somebody lived, there's a chance that a relative might still be living there. So if you're thinking, oh, that neighbor was moved away 20 years ago, well, somebody in that neighborhood might be there that's still in touch with them, sends them a Christmas card or something. It never hurts to go back, and sometimes the mail carrier has carried the mail for 20 years, and that person might know what happened to them or where they went. There's so many different trails. Like I said, 7 miles from the time you're born till after you die.
Anybody else?
You don't have a name, but you have a hospital.
It's like the baby was abandoned.
Yeah, left at the hospital. Don't know if it was
There's no trail to follow. That's just like the guy I told you up in New York in 1933. There's no trail. You know, we don't know anything. So you have to have a trail somewhere to start.
What about if don't the hospital keeps any kind of records of...
Well, they would have a record of finding him, right? They would have had a record of finding him, but they may not have known his name if he was just dropped off and left.
What if he was given birth at that hospital?
Well, there would be a record, and the hospital records might still be somewhere in an archives library. Do you know what that is?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, you might. And the State Archives Library also has something called a birth index. Every baby born is on the birth index whatever city or state you're in.
As an encouragement to people that are novices about this sort of thing, if you go on Ancestry.com, you can find just about anything you want. I have already connected 4 or 5 of my relatives. At least 3 of them were adopted, had no earthly idea who they were. When I contacted them and said, we're first or second cousins, and I'd like to know how we related. And so they write back almost immediately, usually. Oh, I don't know who I am. I was born in such and such a city at such and such a date. And I had one instance fairly recently. I didn't recognize the lady's name, but she was my second cousin or something like that. And when she told me where she was born and the date, and I knew that we were cousins, I said, I think I know who you are. She had no earthly idea who she was. And within 5 or 10 minutes of talking to her, I was able to tell her who her family was. And I had no earthly idea she existed until I saw it on Ancestry.
They charge for that, I assume.
Ancestry is free up to a point, but then you can be a member and have access to worldwide information.
Let's show this next picture, Reunited article, then we'll take another question.
Okay, this was a young... Oh, does anybody know who the Tennessee Children's Home Society was back in the 50s and 40s and 30s? The Memphis branch, there was a scandal about selling babies on the black market. And this one is one of the black market babies that was taken from the mother illegally and given up for adoption. And her sister wouldn't give up the search for her. The sister kept calling me and calling me and calling me. And we finally found It was a long search, and it was quite an experience. I had to go over to Dyer County in West Tennessee, and I followed some records. The Shelby County records of adoption through the Tennessee Children's Home are not in Shelby County. You can't find them because they hid them up in Dyer County.
Really?
And they were in a basement of a building where they stored their archive files just in cardboard boxes. They weren't labeled or anything. All the adoption records are in these boxes. There's like one light bulb hanging from the ceiling with cobwebs. It was like I kept thinking rats were going to be running across the floor. It was not a really nice place to be, but I've discovered that's where the records were. And it's a long story, but there was a judge over there, Judge Lanier, if you've ever heard of him. His father was the court clerk who hid these records. He was a really good friend of the lady who ran the Tennessee Children's Home. Mm-hmm. Am I making this too complicated? Well, Tennessee Children's Home didn't want anybody to know they were selling babies. It is for me. Well, they didn't want anybody to know they were selling babies. And they sold 250 to Hollywood movie stars and another 250 to New York Jewish couples. And they falsified the records, told the Jewish couples these were of Jewish ancestry, and they weren't. Anyway, the people bought these babies, and they would dress them up like pretty little dolls, lay them out on a hotel bed, and the adoptive parents would come say, I want to try that one, I want that one. They picked them out just like a litter of puppies or kittens. That's how they adopted babies way back before there were any laws.
Wow.
Through the Memphis branch only. But it was a big scandal, and it was horrible. And anyway, so this is one of those searches where I found the girl, but I had to go through Judge Lanier. And the records were in his court, and he had put little tiny locks on the books. There's a book called a docket appearance book of everybody that comes to court and why they came to court. And it's a public book where anybody can look at it except in Dyer County. It's got a lock on it and you can't open it. So I go to Judge Lanier and say, may I open that book? May I look up a record? He said, who are you working for and who are you looking for? And I said, do I have to tell you? He said, well, there's a law that says you can't see those books. And I said, well, there's 95 counties in Tennessee and I can see them in the other 94 counties. Would you tell me what law this is? And he said, you're looking at it. It's my law, and you can't see those books. Well, the court clerk had gone with me into the judge's chamber, and she overheard all this. We went back downstairs where the records and where the books were locked up, and she opened a file drawer and said, I'm going to have to take a break. I'll be back in about 15 minutes. And there was the record. She opened the drawer where the record was, and she knew that that was not right for Judge Lanier to do me that way. Anyway, it's a long story. He ended up in prison. Not because of me, though. For something else.
All right, another question?
I was just going to let you know that you can get these free ancestry if you go down to the Tennessee Library and Archives. You can get a wealth of information without having a membership and paying money.
Yes.
Unless you want to sit at your house at midnight like I do.
And you might not know that you can call the reference librarian and request they look it up for you. You don't even have to go down there sometimes. They will look up things for you if they have time.
Would anybody want to share a missing person that they found in their life, that you had been reunited with some family member or a friend? I said Sunday I was hoping that Nanette through the cello was searching for me.
Oh.
I wonder if you have somebody that you have found or they found you. Another question here.
I didn't find anybody that was missing, but my great-grandfather rode on the orphan train, and I was curious if you had worked with anybody else who had been one of the children who was on the orphan train. It was different than the Tennessee Children's Home, but they would stop at, train stations and line the kids up, and people would come and, that one looks strong, I'll take him kind of situation sometimes, and that's how my great-grandfather and his sister were adopted.
That's the way it was back in the 30s. There were so many children that were abandoned, so they had this orphan train, and they loaded all the children on there, And as they came to a stop, the farmers would pick out the biggest boys to work in the field, and that's how they were adopted. They just picked them out off the train at the train stops. And the laws and regulations didn't come in until after this investigation of the Tennessee Children's Home. That's what started it for Tennessee. And so 1950, the laws and regulations started. After that, there were not any more that I know of the black markets, the baby selling rackets. But the orphan train was very sad, as the Tennessee Children's Home Society. Those kids came back 40, 50 years later looking for their biological families. And they said, you know, we never looked like our adoptive family, and we never had anything in common. We always knew we were different. And they found that the records were falsified, and it was really sad. They weren't matched up like they are today. Today, the adoptive parents are more like the biological parents in many cases. And today we have open adoptions too, where everybody knows everybody. And I think that's healthy for everybody too.
Any other burning questions there, comments before we wrap it up?
I do know in one county there was a record kept back in the 20s, 30s for people that were sent by the county judge, as they were known then, to the poorhouse. And sometimes these were orphans. They didn't have any place to put them, so they sent them there. And sometimes there were people that were arrested or put in jail, incarcerated, and their children put in the poorhouse. And one of those books I have seen, it's kept confidential because there is also some medical records in there that a child was sent because of a parent having tuberculosis, primarily the ones that I have seen. But you can't go in the archives and get them without knowing that they're there. And if you'll ask the person, the county archivist will go in and look and see and give you that information. They're required by law to do that. So it's a good record if you get back to the 20s and 30s and you end the trail and you don't know where they may have been in the poorhouse.
Thank you. I didn't know about that particular, where those particular records were. But I can tell you that the Mormon Church, the Church of Latter-day Saints, came along and microfilmed all the records of all the courthouses, and any records that are over 25 years old are in archives, and most of them are on microfilm or microfiche at the state archives. Even if they're at the county level, they'll also be up there at the state level. So if you've never been up to the State Archives Library, there's a wealth of information there.
Thank you, Norma.
You're welcome.
Oh, another question? Okay. Well, thank you, Norma, anyhow.
Well, you're welcome anyhow.
Going back to when you said you can look on the records of birth, if you don't know the exact year, how do you go about looking for that person?
Are you saying on a birth index?
Yeah.
You don't know the year?
He's my little half-brother, and we lost contact after my dad passed away.
Mm-hmm.
And my stepmom does not reach out to me or anything. And I just would kind of like to know where he is.
So you don't have a date of birth on him, but you have his correct...
I have an approximate date.
Okay, but you have his full name, his correct name?
Yes, I have his full name. I know what hospital he was born.
Okay. Are you saying that was his name after he was adopted, or was he adopted?
No, he was not adopted.
He was not adopted.
He's from my dad's second marriage.
Okay. Well, I think that just with your name only, depending on how common it is, if it's a John Smith, it's going to be hard to find. If it's a John something else, you know, it's easy to put it in a database and find it. So if you want to contact me, I'll run it in the database and see if I can find him for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Going once. Thank you, Norma, for being with us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Very interesting. Well, next month, Wednesday, February 6th, 2019, on Stories of Amazing Grace, former convict Alan Brooks will be my guest. He's written a couple of books. I think we have those right here. We get these mixed up with your book. By the way, your books are free out in the lobby. Kamikaze is one that he wrote. Another is called Ransomed. So we'll be talking to him next month. And his interview just might make us rethink the prejudice that many of us have about convicts and the people who love them. That's Albert Brooks next month. Thanks again for being with us, and have a safe trip home and Happy New Year.